The silence in the car was a living thing. It was heavier than the worn leather of the seats, thicker than the cloying scent of the pine tree air freshener Eleanor insisted upon, a scent that never quite masked the faint, antiseptic odor of clinic waiting rooms. Liam drove with his hands at 10 and 2, his posture perfect, his eyes fixed on the ribbon of gray asphalt unfolding before them. Every line of his body was composed, a study in tranquility that belied the tectonic shift that had just occurred within him. A 5-year-long chapter of his life had just ended, and the only sound to mark its passing was the rhythmic thump of the tires on the pavement. Eleanor, his mother-in-law, sat in the passenger seat, oblivious. She was busy reapplying her lipstick in the vanity mirror, her small, pursed mouth a caricature of discontent. She snapped the mirror shut with a click that sounded like a gunshot in the profound quiet. "Well, that was a complete waste of time," she announced, her voice raspy from disuse during the hour-long drive. "Dr. Sterling has the bedside manner of a troll. My dear late husband, a real doctor, would never have stood for it." Liam didn't respond. He didn't nod or make the usual placating sound in the back of his throat. He simply continued to drive. The silence that followed her pronouncement was different. It was no longer a neutral space. It was an answer. For a moment, Eleanor seemed to notice. She lowered her lipstick, a tube of defiant crimson, and glanced at his profile. His jaw was set, but it was always set. His gaze was steady, but it was always steady. Finding no overt sign of rebellion, she dismissed the feeling, attributing the oppressive atmosphere to her own post-appointment malaise. She didn't know that Liam was, in that moment, replaying the 2 words she had spoken less than 30 minutes ago. Not to him, of course, never to him. They were spoken about him, which was so much worse. He had left her side for a moment in the bustling specialist's office to retrieve the cashmere shawl she'd left in the car, a frequent and frustrating ritual. As he approached the seating area, he saw her engaged in conversation with Marge, another silver-haired widow from her social circle. Marge gestured with her chin toward the entrance. "Is that your son helping you today, Eleanor? He's so wonderfully attentive." Liam had paused behind a large potted fern, not meaning to eavesdrop but momentarily trapped. He saw Eleanor wave a dismissive, beringed hand, a gesture he knew intimately. It was the same gesture she used to wave away a waiter, a fly, an unpleasant thought. "Oh, him," Eleanor had said, her voice carrying clearly across the polished floor. Then came the 2 words, delivered with the casual cruelty of a queen swatting a commoner. "Just furniture." The words didn't sting, they didn't burn. They landed with the cold, heavy finality of a spadeful of dirt on a coffin. He was not a person, not a son-in-law, not the man who had rearranged his entire professional life for 5 years to become her unpaid, on-call chauffeur and medical advocate. He was an object, a convenience, an inanimate thing that existed only to serve her needs, as unremarkable and unvalued as the chair she was sitting on. He had stepped out from behind the plant, his expression a mask of placid neutrality. He draped the shawl over her shoulders, his fingers careful not to brush against her skin. "You'll catch a chill," he'd said, his voice even. She had simply nodded, pulling the soft wool around her as if it had materialized from thin air, already turning back to her conversation. He had ceased to exist for her the moment the service was rendered. Now, in the car, the 2 words echoed in the vast, silent space of his mind. Just furniture. He thought of all the things furniture did. It waited. It bore weight. It filled a space until it was no longer needed. It was moved and replaced without a thought. For 5 years, he had been the most reliable piece of furniture in her life. And in the space of a single breath, she had confirmed it was all she would ever see him as. The quiet resolve that settled over him was as solid and unshakable as a foundation poured from concrete and steel. He would drive her home today. He would help her up the steps, unlock her door, and ensure she was settled. And then he would never, ever, do it again. The service was over. The furniture was being removed. Before you and I continue this journey, I just want to say thank you for being here. Stories like this are about more than just words. They're about shared feelings of frustration, hope, and the desire for things to be set right. If you're already feeling that pull, I'd be so grateful if you take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know that these stories are finding a home. Also, I love knowing where you're all watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. All right, let's get back to it. The foundation of this story was built over 5 long years, and it's time to see exactly what that looked like. The routine had calcified over 60 long months, becoming as much a part of Liam's life as brushing his teeth. It began with a phone call, usually from his wife Chloe. "Hi, honey. Mom has an appointment with the cardiologist on Tuesday at 10. Can you?" The question always hung in the air, unfinished. It didn't need to be. The answer had been yes for 1,825 consecutive days, accounting for weekends and holidays. His compliance had started as a loving favor to Chloe. Her father, a kind, gentle man whom Liam had genuinely admired, had passed away 6 years prior. A year after his death, Eleanor's own health began a slow, cascading decline. A touch of vertigo here, a heart palpitation there, a creak in the joints that blossomed into full-blown arthritis, a constellation of ailments that required a universe of specialists. Chloe, a dedicated third-grade teacher, was trapped by the rigid school schedule. Liam, who described his work to them as a freelance draftsman with a flexible schedule, seemed the logical solution. So he had agreed. At first it was once a month, then twice. Soon it was a weekly pilgrimage to one of a dozen sterile buildings across the city, each with the same smell of disinfectant and quiet desperation. Tuesday was cardiology, Wednesday was rheumatology, Friday was physical therapy. His own schedule, the complex and demanding calendar of a successful architect, was contorted, twisted, and reshaped around Eleanor's medical needs. Meetings were pushed to evenings. Site visits were scheduled for dawn. His entire professional life was crammed into the margins of his duties as an unpaid chauffeur. The humiliation was a slow drip erosion of his dignity. It was never a single dramatic confrontation. It was 1,000 tiny cuts. It was in the way Eleanor would sigh with theatrical impatience if he was 2 minutes late, tapping her watch as if he were a delinquent employee. It was in the constant, unsolicited critiques of his car, a perfectly respectable and reliable sedan. "Honestly, Liam, this car has no suspension. I feel every single bump. My Arthur would never have driven something so pedestrian." It was in her complete lack of curiosity about his life. In 5 years, she had never once asked him a substantive question about his work. To her, he was perpetually drawing his little lines, a hobbyist pastime, not a career that had earned him accolades and a quiet fortune. He would sometimes be on a call with a contractor before she got in the car, discussing load-bearing walls or zoning variances, and she would interrupt without preamble. "Liam, we need to stop for my prescription, and none of that dreadful generic rubbish this time." He would endure it all with a placid smile. He would wait for hours in vinyl chairs, reading architectural journals on his tablet while she was in her appointments. He'd fetch her water, her forgotten glasses, her ridiculously expensive cashmere shawls. He learned the intricate dance of her medications, the names of her doctors, the precise level of pressure she preferred on her elbow as he helped her up a curb. He became an expert in Eleanor Vance. In return, he received no thanks, no acknowledgement. He was a function, not a person, a tool to be used. The secondary conflict, the one that truly pained him, was Chloe. She was caught in the middle, a gentle soul who abhorred conflict. She would call him after he dropped her mother home. "Thank you, thank you, thank you, my love," she would gush. her voice full of genuine gratitude that was like a balm on his